Hi and welcome to a series of BuildForge installation videos. In this particular video I'm going to show you the steps to create a DB2 database and configure it for BuildForge, as well as get BuildForge installed with the DB2 database. The first thing we need to do is to review the documentation online, and the documentation online nicely describes the steps or procedures needed. And as you can see here, there's basically just three steps, and the first one being is we need to create a user on the operating system. This is done in the control panel. If I launch my control panel and manage accounts, in the interest of time I've already created a standard BuildForge user. I just named it build, and this will be used by BuildForge to access the database. Once that's been created and we go back to the procedures, what we have to do is to create the database and the schema and provide all the necessary permissions. Luckily for us, we already have the set of commands that we need to issue in DB2. I've copied these and placed them in a notepad just to make things easier. So let's go ahead and create a database and set up the permissions and so forth. The first thing, we'll go to DB2 program group and we'll launch the command window. And here is where we can execute all the different DB2 commands that we had seen in the documentation. So I have captured these here in the notepad, and the first one is to create the actual database with some settings. So if I just copy and paste that here and execute that, and as you can see, a database now has been created. Our next command is to connect to that database that we just created and create the schema in that database. If I do the same thing, copy the command, paste it here and execute, and we've connected to build. Next step is to create the schema. Again, copy and paste it into here. And that was a quick one, and it's created the schema in there. And finally, we'll disconnect for the changes to take place and connect to build again. Now they're connected back in, we're going to go ahead and provide the necessary permissions. So if I copy this, paste it in there, that grant command was completed successfully, and then the next grant command, paste it there. Let's commit that. And finally, we exit the command prompt. So now we've actually set up a DB2 database as per the actual documentation. There are a number of things that we also need during the installation, which is described in this section here, DB2 information needed during installation. And these things will be asked during the setup. I've again captured these in a notepad just for ease. let's proceed with actually installing BuildForge. Now what BuildForge uses is the IBM Installation Manager. The first thing we need to do is to launch the Installation Manager. And that's should be already set up. And if I go to my Installation Manager, what we're going to do here is to set up the repository, so then we can go ahead and install BuildForge. And to set up the repository, go to File, Preferences, and here's where we're going to set up the repository. If we add the repository, and if I locate the actual repository.config is in this path on my system, browse, select that one and open. Okay, and we're good there. And now we can proceed to install BuildForge. And as the version 8006, select that particular version, click Next. Accept the license agreement, and I'm going to create this new package group. As you saw, there was already one existing from a previous installation, so I'm just going to change the name. And accept the defaults, because these are all the components that we will need. Okay, so luckily you would have captured all the information about the licenses. My license server in this case is located on my machine, and I am using a different port number, so I'm going to change that. And hopefully here we do a test and it should pass. And yep, it tells me my license server is ready. Click Next. So we are going to use DB2, so we select DB2, and we are going to populate the database, so we'll leave that as selected as yes. Now the DB2 host is on my machine. The default port we can leave. The database name was build, and the schema was also build. If you've called it something different, specify as per your naming convention. And the database user was also build. And enter the password. And the JDBC driver location, in my case it's located in this area. Just copy, paste. And now we do a database test connection. The test pass, click Next. So here it's asking for the client library configurations, and in my case it's located here. And we'll proceed to do another test connection. Okay, so the test passed and we can proceed. Click Next. And here is where you can specify your own web server and PHP configurations. I'm just going to accept the default. Click Next. And if you were to install WebSphere or configure WebSphere, you would select yes here. I'm just going to use the default, which is Tomcat, and also leave the default port numbers as they are. And it's actually telling me that the domain name here looks questionable, so I have to provide the fully qualified domain name. And we proceed to Next. Again, leaving the defaults. And these are the key store passwords that we need to specify here. Make sure that you make a note of these. And again, for the certificate, I'm just going to select the default. If you do have your own cert, then you select yes here. And I'm going to have service mode selected and click Next here. And finally proceed to install. And finally, Buildforge has completed the installation, and at this point we just click Finish and exit the installation manager. So in summary, we created a DB2 database, configured it with the right permissions, and then we used the IBM installation manager to go ahead and install Buildforge, and as you saw, it completed successfully. Thank you for watching.